Everyone ignored the lost elderly millionairess until a young black man grabbed her hand. When he found out he did, ... Asterisk in the chaos of a big city, an elderly woman walks alone through the crowded streets, dressed in simple clothes, visibly confused. She mutters disconnected words. People pass by, they glance, judge, ignore. No one imagines who she truly is, until Davi, a 19-year-old black delivery worker from the outskirts, notices something unusual. As cars honk and crowds rush past, he stops. He gently holds her hand and asks, "Ma'am, do you need help?" She smiles and begins to cry. When he takes her to the police station to find her family, Davi uncovers a truth that changes everything. The woman is Victoria Brandau, one of the richest women in the country, reported missing for 2 days in Air 2, a vast business empire. But what shocks everyone isn't just Dave's kindness. It's what happens next. Victoria refuses to return immediately to her family. Instead, she makes a surprising request. "I want to spend time with this young man. He looked at me like a human being." In the following days, the media is captivated by the bond between the millionaire and the young man. Victoria reveals she didn't run away due to dementia, but because of loneliness. Tired of a life surrounded by greed, empty luxury, and grandchildren, only interested in her inheritance. Inspired by Davi, Victoria begins to reevaluate everything she built and decides to change the future of her fortune. Now, the entire country watches the unexpected transformation. One simple act of empathy didn't just change the life of an invisible young man, it changed the heart of a woman who had everything. Accept humanity, asterisk the touch of humanity, Chapter 1, Indifferent Chaos and the Gaze that Saw Beyond it. The deafening turmoil of the city center, where progress was measured in decibels of honking horns and time and hurried steps, a figure stood out. An elderly woman, her body bent by age and her mind visibly confused. She wore simple clothes, faded from use, as if she had been torn from a distant past and thrown into the relentless present. Her eyes, once full of stories, now wandered, lost amidst the indifferent crowd. She mumbled disjointed words that vanished in the traffic's roar. Everyone passed her by, they looked, yes, but with a quick judgment, a veiled contempt, before rushing on, busy with their own lives, in their own bubbles of importance. No one imagined who she truly was. Luxury cars, symbols of the wealth accumulating. In distant skyscrapers, glided down the avenue, their drivers oblivious to the fragility of that life on the sidewalk. The gleaming shop windows, displaying jewels and designer brands, seemed to mock the poverty and loneliness of the elderly woman. She was invisible. A stain on the urban landscape that everyone preferred to ignore, an uncomfortable reminder of human vulnerability that money and power tried to ward off. The woman's loneliness wasn't just physical. It was a loneliness of the soul, an absence of connection in a world that moved too fast to notice those left behind. She was an echo of a forgotten time, a lost soul amidst modern haste. But destiny, at times, chooses the most unlikely to manifest its presence. Amidst the chaos, a young man with the agility of someone who makes the street his office noticed something strange. Davi, a 19-year-old black youth, living on the city's outskirts and a delivery app driver, pedaled his bicycle between cars and pedestrians. His mind focused on the next delivery, the next cent. He was accustomed to seeing misery, indifference, the struggle to survive. But the look in that woman's eyes, the way she hunched over, touched something in his heart. He stopped. Against the flow of traffic and haste, he dismounted his bicycle, leaned it against a pole, and approached. He took the woman's hand, his young, strong skin contrasting with her wrinkled, fragile one. "Do you need help, ma'am?" Davi asked, his voice calm and gentle, an island of humanity in the middle of the chaos. She looked at him, and a faint smile appeared on her lips, before tears began to stream down her tired face. Chapter 2. The smile of tears and the truth that shocks the woman's. Smile and tears were a response Davi didn't expect. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief, of a deep emotion that finally found a channel to express itself. He felt the fragility of her hand in his, and a wave of compassion washed over him. Cars kept honking, people rushed on, but Davi was in his own bubble of humanity, immune to the surrounding chaos. He knew he had to help. Not for reward, but from a simple instinct to do what was right. Davi slowly led the woman to the nearest police station. Each step was an effort for her, but she clung to his hand with surprising strength, as if he were her only anchor in a sea of confusion. The police station's atmosphere, cold and bureaucratic, contrasted with Dave's warm kindness. He tried to explain the situation to the officers, describing how he had found her, her disjointed words. The officers, accustomed to dealing with lost and disoriented people, tried to remain patient, but the woman's story seemed to make no sense. It was then that a name was uttered. Almost by chance by one of the agents, while checking a list of high-profile missing persons. The name, Vittoria Brandao.
Davi froze.
That name was synonymous with power, with wealth, with a business empire that controlled a large part of the country. Vittoria Brandao, one of the richest women in the country, reported missing 2 days ago, an heiress to one of the largest fortunes. The truth he discovered changed everything. That fragile woman, in simple clothes with a lost gaze, was the powerful Vittoria Brandao. The shock was indescribable, the irony cruel. The woman who had been ignored by everyone for her humble appearance was one of the pillars of the elite the world revered. But what would surprise everyone wasn't just Davy's gesture. The way he had saved her was what happened next. Chapter 3. The unexpected request and the soul's unveiling, the revelation of Vittoria Brandau's identity at the police station caused an uproar. Police mobilized, journalists were alerted, and the news spread like wildfire. The rescue of the missing billionaire, found by a young delivery app driver, made headlines. Vittoria's family, with their lawyers and advisors, rushed to the station, concerned about reputation and fortune, but, to everyone's surprise, Vittoria didn't greet them with the expected embrace. She looked at them with a coldness that Riccardo Lacerda, the CEO from a previous script, who fought against superficiality, if the connection is maintained, would recognize, sitting in a reserved room at the police station, with Davi by her side. The elderly millionaire, once confused, now radiated a clarity and determination that shocked even the security agents. She refused to return immediately with her family. Instead, she made an unexpected request, a request that silenced everyone present. "I want to spend some time with this young man. He looked at me like a human being." Vittoria's words struck her family and the press like a lightning bolt. It wasn't a request for a reward, not a demand for luxury. It was a plea for humanity, for a connection that she, with all her fortune, had not found. In the following days, the media followed with astonishment the unusual bond between the millionaire and the young man from the periphery. Vittoria refused to return to her mansion, to her old commitments. She asked to stay at the temporary shelter where Davi lived with other young people, wanting to experience real life, the life she had ignored for so long. She revealed that she had fled not due to dementia, but due to loneliness tired of living, surrounded by self-interest, empty luxury, and grandchildren who only asked about inheritance. Her life was a gilded cage, and the only thing holding her captive was the coldness of her own family, who saw her as an asset, not as a grandmother, a mother. Inspired by Davi, by his simple act of kindness, Vittoria began to reevaluate everything she had built. The humanity she had abandoned was there, before her, in the person of a young black man from the periphery, missing millionaire. Vittoria Brandao was found by a young black man, and what she did shocked everyone. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this thrilling saga of redemption, loneliness, and the power of humanity. Hit like if you're also moved by Davi's gesture and curious to see Vittoria's transformation. Share this video so more people can dive into this powerful tale of destiny, wealth, the true value of human connection. Comment below. What do you think Vittoria will learn from Davi? How will her family react to this decision? The Touch of Humanity, Chapter 4. The Truths of the Asphalt and the Mirror of Solitude of Vittoria. Brandao's decision to stay with Davi in a makeshift shelter echoed like thunder through high society and the media. Her advisors and lawyers tried everything to force her back, claiming insanity or a post-disappearance trauma. But Vittoria, with newfound lucidity and peace, refused. Away from the spotlight, she plunged headfirst into the real world, a universe she had ignored her entire life. The smell of simple food and the murmur of voices mingled in the shelter's air. A stark contrast to the sterile silence of her mansion, Davi, the young delivery driver, became her guide in this new territory. He taught her about the nuances of the periphery, about the dignity that resisted poverty, and about the solidarity money couldn't buy. Together, they visited community kitchens, talked with young people who dreamed of escaping that reality, and listened to the stories of those the system had forgotten. Vittoria, who once saw people as assets or liabilities, now saw souls, each with their own struggles and hopes. She washed dishes, helped serve meals, and listened with an attentiveness she had never given to her own directors. This immersion in the real world acted as a mirror for Vittoria. She saw reflected in the lives of those below the loneliness that consumed her in her own ivory tower, the empty luxury, the grandchildren who only cared about inheritance, the coldness of her own family. Everything became a torment. She realized that her entire life she had been a prisoner of her own name, of her own fortune. What Davi, in his simplicity, offered her was what she most desired: human connection. With each day spent in the shelter, with each story she heard, Vittoria felt the walls of her soul, once shielded, begin to crumble. She was healing, and the process was painful but liberating. Chapter 5. The Enigma of the Past and the Confrontation with Guilt. Vittoria Brandau's transformation. The millionaire who traded luxury for a simple life went viral in the media. Hashtag VITORIA with Davi spread, and her story of redemption inspired millions. But Vittoria's family, led by her older grandchildren who managed the Brandau empire, saw the situation as a threat. They feared their disoriented grandmother might compromise the family's fortune or legacy. They began to orchestrate a plan to publicly discredit her, claiming she was suffering from dementia and that Davi was manipulating her for personal gain. Davi, however, maintained his integrity. He asked for nothing, only the chance to help. Vittoria, trusting him, began to unravel the enigma of her own past. She remembered an elderly nun, Sister Josefina, who had worked with her mother on an old social project, and was one of the few who knew the deepest secrets of the Brandau family. Vittoria recalled whispers, veiled conversations, a truth that had been buried for decades. She and Davi embarked on a search for Sister Josefina at an isolated convent inland. Far from the curious eyes of the press, the encounter with Sister Josefina was a dive into the past. The nun, with her sharp memory and serene gaze, revealed a disturbing plot to Vittoria. The Brandau fortune, which she believed was built on hard work and innovation, had a stain. Decades ago, her own father had silenced and ruined the life of a brilliant inventor, a black man who developed revolutionary technology for the pharmaceutical sector, the same sector as the Albuquerque Empire. If the script connection is maintained, stealing his patent and his merits, the Brandau fortune was, in part, built on a crime, a theft of dignity and dreams. Vittoria's guilt was not just for her loneliness, it was for a tainted legacy, and the truth crushed her. Chapter 6. The Cry for Justice and the Legacy of Truth. Sister Josefina's revelation about the Brandau fortune's original sin struck Vittoria like a lightning bolt. The empire she inherited, and of which she was so proud, was corroded by injustice. Tears streamed down her face, no longer from loneliness, but from shame and indignation. She realized that her empty, solitary life was a reflection of the inhumanity. In her own lineage, Davi's presence, with his purity, sharply contrasted with the darkness of her family's past. She knew she had to act, not just for her own redemption, but for the redemption of her surname. With Davi's help, who became her confidant and ally, Vittoria devised a bold plan. She would call a press conference, not to deny the rumors of dementia, but to publicly expose the truth about the Brandau fortune, her father's crimes, and the manipulation he had orchestrated. She would announce the creation of a foundation. The Renasser Foundation, Dignity and Opportunity, which would use a large part of her fortune to repair past wrongs. Investing in talented young black individuals and in social inclusion and education projects. Davi would be the first to join the foundation's team. His experience and humanity would be the project's heart. News of Vittoria. Brandau's press conference shocked the country. Her family, furious, tried to stop her, but Vittoria was unyielding. Ricardo Dantas, Ottavio's father, who had been confronted with the truth about his own empire, if the connection to the equation of life is maintained, watched with a sense of recognition of what was to come. On the day of the conference, Vittoria Brandau, with Davi by her side, took the podium. Her voice, once hesitant, resonated with unyielding strength. She confessed the truth about the fortune, her father's crimes, and the loneliness the fortune brought. She announced the Renasser Foundation, a legacy of hope. The scene went viral, shocking the country. The question echoing was, who truly has more worth, who bears the Brandau name, or who has the courage to be human? The cliffhanger was the promise of a revolution, where wealth would be used to heal, and forgiveness to transform lives. Millionaire Vittoria Brandau reveals a secret that shakes her empire and decides to change everything. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this thrilling saga of justice, redemption, and a legacy that transforms lives. Hit like if you're also impressed by Vittoria's courage and her partnership with Davi. Share this video so more people can dive into this powerful tale of family secrets, wealth, and the true value of dignity. Comment below. What do you think of Vittoria's decision? Will she manage to change the Brandau family's legacy? Chapter 7. The Soul's Answer and the Judgment of Truth. Vittoria's decision to stay with Davi, confronting her own family and high society's judgment, resonated like thunder. Away from the courtrooms, her life in the community deepened, and the peace she found in serving others was a balm to her wounded soul. She, who once saw people as assets or liabilities, now saw souls, each with their own struggles and hopes. With every dish washed, every story heard, Vittoria felt the walls of her soul, once shielded, begin to crumble. But Vittoria and Davi's new life attracted the attention of figures who knew the Brandau Empire intimately.
One such person was Ricardo
Dantas, the magnate who once lost everything and found redemption if the connection to previous scripts is maintained, who observed with a mix of admiration and recognition. However, there was also Ricardo Azevedo, a cold and ruthless businessman. If the connection to previous scripts is maintained, who saw Vittoria's change as a weakness and an opportunity? He, who had been the biological father of João Leonardo's son, if the connection is active and had a past link to illegal adoptions, distrusted Vittoria's sudden conversion and saw her as a threat to his own secrets. Ricardo Azevedo, with his coldness, began to orchestrate a campaign to discredit Vittoria and Davi. He leaked distorted information to the media about Vittoria's mental fragility, trying to reactivate the dementia narrative and insinuating that Davi was a swindler. The press, always eager for a scandal, began to question the sincerity of their relationship and the true motives behind Vittoria's refusal to return to her fortune. Vittoria felt the weight of the threat, the pain of slander, but looking at Davi, at his unwavering purity, she knew the fight would be waged on the battlefield of truth. Chapter. Light in the storm and the resilience of purpose amidst the media. Attack orchestrated by Ricardo Azevedo, Vittoria's determination shone. She knew she couldn't fight with the old weapons of the elite. Her strength was no longer money, but the truth and the humanity she had rediscovered. With Davi by her side, she called a press conference at the shelter itself, surrounded by the people she now called family. There was no luxury, just the raw truth of reality. Vittoria did not defend herself against the accusations. Instead, she publicly confessed her own past loneliness, the coldness of her life at the top, the hypocrisy that surrounded her, and how her money couldn't heal the void in her soul. She spoke of her encounter with Davi, the simple gesture that made her see herself and the world around her. She described the dignity of the people from the periphery, the solidarity and affection that welcomed her when she was most lost. Her testimony was not that of a billionaire, but of a woman who found her humanity in the streets. Davi, with the courage and simplicity that characterized him, defended Vittoria. He spoke of her kindness, her dedication to the shelter, and the love that united her with people. Contrast between the coldness of the accusations and their authenticity moved the country. Ricardo Azevedo was unmasked by his own malice, and Vittoria and Davi's story went viral again. But this time, as a symbol of redemption and resilience, proving that truth was stronger than any lie. Chapter 9. The Seed of the Future and the Voice of Millions. The victory over Ricardo Azevedo was not the end of Vittoria's journey, but the beginning of a new and ambitious chapter. The Renascer Foundation, dignity and opportunity, which she had announced, flourished under her leadership. It was not just a foundation, but a movement that sought to reverse the Brandão family's past wrongs. Investing in young black talents and in social inclusion and education projects, Davi, her guide and partner, became the executive director. His experience and humanity were the heart of the project. Vittoria's voice, once a discreet whisper in her luxurious life, was now a cry for justice and dignity. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story worldwide. She didn't talk about business, but about the importance of seeing the value in every human being, of breaking down barriers of prejudice, and of building a society where humanity prevails over greed. Her iconic phrase, "He looked at me like a human being," echoed in every one of her speeches, transforming her into a global symbol of hope. Vittoria's family, who had rejected her, watched from afar, divided. Grandchildren, once obsessed with inheritance, now confronted the truth about the Brandão family's legacy. Some, moved by Vittoria's story, sought out the foundation, asking for a chance to participate in making amends. The invisible captivity was crumbling, and the truth about the fortune was finally exposed to the world, revealing that prison, at times, has no visible bars, and that the true kidnappers can be those who hide behind privilege. The legacy of the unexpected genius and the echoing question, the Renascer Foundation, dignity and opportunity, created with Vittoria's passion and Davi's wisdom, became a beacon of hope. Money, once a symbol of power and exclusion, was now an instrument of transformation. The Foundation's mentorship program grew exponentially, revealing brilliant talents in marginalized communities who otherwise would never have been seen. Young people like Joe, the artist boy from a previous script, if the connection is maintained, flourished under its tutelage. Their art and stories a testament to the power of second chances. Vittoria's story went viral worldwide. She became an icon, inspiring millions of people not to give up on their dreams, to fight against prejudice, and to seek dignity in every step. Valenca Tech, Ricardo Valenca's former company, if the connection is maintained, which had undergone its own redemption, became a partner of the Renascer Foundation, a model of corporate social responsibility. Ricardo, Valenca, and Vittoria, the millionaire and the billionaire. The man and the woman, once separated by privilege, were now inseparable partners in a larger mission, proving that humanity does not choose social class. In the end, Vittoria's, the story of her unexpected fall and rise and her global impact, forced the world to a final question that echoed in every mind. How many Vittorias does the world still ignore? How many brilliant talents are hidden under cloaks of invisibility, waiting for a chance, for a glance, for someone to recognize them? Vittoria's story was not just a tragedy transformed into a miracle. It was a call to action, an invitation for each of us to look beyond appearances and seek the true richness that exists in every human being. Millionaire. Vittoria Brandão is fighting for truth and dignity. Her gesture has inspired everyone. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this thrilling saga of justice, transformation, and the power of humanity. Hit like if you also believe that kindness can change the world, and that everyone deserves to be seen. Share this video so more people can dive into this powerful tale of redemption and social impact. Comment below.
What's the biggest lesson Vittoria and Davi's story taught you? How many Vittorias do you think the
world still ignores? Chapter 11. the new wealth and the legacy that blooms with Elias and Joe. His rediscovered son by his side, Leonardo felt the coldness that had surrounded him for years begin to melt, giving way to a peace that billions never gave him. He, who had built an empire on the denial of poverty and injustice, now found himself immersed in this world he once despised, with a renewed purpose. The Joe Foundation, the legacy of life, flourished under his leadership, a beacon of hope and a model of social transformation. Leonardo dedicated every ounce of his energy to the foundation, working side by side with Donna Alina, who was now the executive director, and Sophia Elias's mother, who brought the perspective of the streets. Valenka Tech, his former company, which he had restructured, became a pillar of support, developing social technologies for the foundation. Healthcare access apps, distance education platforms for youth from underserved communities, and clean energy systems were some of the projects that came to life under the technical supervision of David, the young engineer he had previously harmed and who was now a dedicated partner. David, whose own redemption intertwined with Leonardo's, used his talent to build a more just future, honoring the memory of Lara, if the connection to other scripts is active, who had been a victim of blind ambition. Sister Clara the nun, who had rescued Joe, became the foundation's spiritual advisor, her calm and wisdom a guide for all. Jonas, the wise homeless man who initiated Leonardo's transformation, remained on his sidewalk, his sanctuary, and Leonardo visited him regularly, not as a benefactor, but as a student, seeking his guidance. The Joe Foundation, the legacy of life, became living proof that life, when lived with purpose, can solve the most complex of equations, that of dividing to multiply. Chapter 12. The Voice of Hope and the Confrontation with the Past. The story of Leonardo Azevedo, the millionaire who lost everything to find his son and his soul, echoed throughout the world. The Joe Foundation, the legacy of life, was cited in newspapers, news broadcasts, and social media as an example that compassion and truth can transform the world. Leonardo, once a recluse, became a sought-after speaker, giving presentations at international conferences. He didn't talk about profits, but about the importance of humility, empathy, and social justice. His voice, once arrogant, now resonated with a conviction that silenced everyone. He became an ambassador for change, an example that humans can rebuild themselves even after the greatest of falls. However, Leonardo's rise brought with it one last, unexpected confrontation. His father, Ricardo Dantas, family patriarch and still powerful magnate, and one of the main characters in other interconnected scripts, observed Leonardo's transformation with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Ricardo Dantas, who had crushed Lara's family and other projects in his relentless pursuit of power, couldn't stand the idea of his son dismantling the family legacy in the name of charity. He saw Leonardo's change as a betrayal, a weakness. Ricardo Dantas confronted Leonardo publicly, accusing him of being a lunatic, of destroying the family name. But Leonardo didn't back down, faced his father with the serenity he had learned. On the streets, he spoke of the legacy of injustice he had received, of the hidden crimes that stained the Azevedo or Dantas. If the father's surname is kept fortune, and of the faces his father had ignored, it was a final reckoning not just between father and son, but between two philosophies of life: greed versus compassion, appearance versus truth. Chapter 13. The Legacy of Forgiveness and the Rejected Inheritance. The public confrontation between Leonardo and his father, Ricardo Dantas, was a watershed moment. Leonardo, armed with truth and the peace of his new life, exposed the crimes of Dantas Tech, the abuses of power, and his father's hypocrisy. The news shook the corporate world. Ricardo Dantas, finally unmasked, watched the remainder of his empire crumble under the weight of his own transgressions and public condemnation. Society, which once revered him, now viewed him with contempt. The power he so cherished vanished, and he found himself alone, abandoned by all he had manipulated. Despite the pain of exposing his own father, Leonardo felt a profound liberation. The Joe Foundation, the legacy of life, received an unprecedented wave of support and donations. Dantas Tech, once a symbol of corruption, transformed into a social technology company. Under David's leadership, dedicated to creating solutions for disadvantaged communities. Leonardo's legacy would not be that of a ruthless millionaire, but of a man who had the courage to break his family's cycle of injustice and forge a new path based on truth and reparation. Forgiveness came from unexpected places. Lara's parents, the young woman whose project was stolen, and Mariana's family, the woman who suffered abandonment connecting to previous scripts, sought out Leonardo. They saw the sincerity in his transformation and offered not absolution, but acceptance. Leonardo, with tears in his eyes, offered his life to honor Lara's memory and to support Mariana and her family. Forgiveness, he understood, was not a single act, but a continuous process of healing and service. It's a cycle that perpetuated itself through the clean hands he now offered. Chapter 14. The Price of Freedom and the Solved Equation. Years passed. Leonardo Azevedo, now with graying hair, was a happy and fulfilled man. Though he lived a simple life, far from the luxury of his past, his fortune, transformed into social impact, had changed thousands of lives. The Joe Foundation, the legacy of life, was a global success. And Leonardo, along with Elias, Joe, Sophia, Donna, Elena, David, and Mariana, were its pillars. He had found freedom not in the absence of responsibilities, but in the choice to serve, to divide, to multiply love and dignity. Jonas, the wise homeless man, remained on the sidewalk, his sanctuary. He was the soul of the foundation, the constant reminder that true wisdom isn't in books, but in experience, and that the greatest wealth is in dignity. Leonardo visited him regularly, not as a benefactor, but as a student, seeking his guidance and sharing the foundation's success stories. The two, the ex-billionaire and the homeless man, were living proof that life, when lived with purpose, can solve the most complex of equations, that of dividing to multiply. The story ends with Leonardo, now elderly, sitting on the sidewalk where it all began, in the same spot where Jonas gave him his only meal and the phrase that changed his life. If the connection with Jonas's script is maintained, he smiles, a serene smile, and with a piece of chalk, he writes on the ground, "Life is an equation we can all solve. Love plus dignity plus service equals redemption." He had lost everything, but he had gained his soul, his family, not by blood, but by heart and a purpose that transcended any fortune. Chapter 15. The Infinite Legacy and the Echo. Of wisdom, the legacy of Leonardo Azevedo and the Joe Foundation. The legacy of life transcended his own existence. The foundation continued to thrive under Elias and Joe's leadership, who, inspired by Jonas and Leonardo, became prominent figures in the fight for social justice. Azevedo Tech, or Dantas Tech, if the father's surname is kept, once a symbol of greed, was now an ethical company, developing technologies for the common good, proving that talent can be used to heal, not to destroy. The story of Leonardo and his family's redemption became a modern myth, an urban fable told from generation to generation. They were proof that humility can bring down arrogance, that forgiveness can heal the deepest wounds, and that true wealth is not measured in billions, but in the capacity to divide. The question that echoed at the beginning of Leonardo's journey, "Your baby is still alive?" was now a universal maxim, a lesson humanity was beginning to learn about secrets and hope. The final scene of the script is a tranquil cemetery, where Leonardo Azevedo's tombstone rests beside his wife's and Joe's. If that burial continuity is maintained, a simple inscription: "He lost everything to find life." On a sunny day, Elias, now adult with his own family, visits the graves. He tells stories to his children, Leonardo's grandchildren, about the man he saved, about the boy who became his father, and about the strong woman who guided them. The echo of "Your baby is still alive" was no longer a cry of pain or revelation, but a song of unconditional love that transcended generations, proving that the legacy of a redeemed soul is eternal. We've reached the end of this emotional journey of redemption. If Leonardo and Joe's story has moved you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our inspiring stories of triumph and the true value of life. Hit the like button if you believe that compassion and truth can transform the world. Share this video so more people can dive into this powerful tale and reflect on their own equations of life. Comment below. What's the biggest lesson this story taught you? Do you believe Leonardo finally found the peace and freedom he sought?